I want to read something from the Course in Miracles, and I just got this idea to. This is from the Purple Book, and it's on guilt because there were questions about the understanding of guilt in last week's session. So let's just I'll read this as a way for you to, when you have time, you can listen and see if it becomes clear to you. So this is in chapter 5, and this is in the 6th part of chapter 5, the ego's use of guilt. Perhaps this will become clearer and more personally meaningful if the ego's use of guilt is clarified. The ego has a purpose, just as the Holy Spirit has. The ego's purpose is fear, because only the fearful can be egotistic. The ego's logic is as impeccable as that of the Holy Spirit, because your mind has all the means at its disposal to side with heaven or earth as it elects. But let us again remember that both are in you. In heaven there is no guilt, because the kingdom is attained through the atonement, which creates it in you. The word create is appropriate here, because once what you have made is undone by the Holy Spirit, the blessed residue is restored and therefore continues in creation. I'm going to read that sentence again. The word create is appropriate here, because once what you have made is undone by the Holy Spirit, meaning the guilt you have chosen, the blessed residue is restored and therefore continues in creation. What is truly blessed is incapable of giving rise to guilt and must give rise to joy. This makes it invulnerable to the ego, because its peace is unassailable. It is invulnerable to disruption because it is whole. Guilt is always disruptive. Anything that engenders fear is divisive, because it obeys the law of division. If the ego is the symbol of the separation, it is also the symbol of guilt. Guilt is more than merely not of God. It is the symbol of the attack on God. This is a totally meaningless concept, except to the ego, of course, but do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which all guilt really stems. The ego is the part of the mind which believes in division. But how can part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking him? We spoke before of the authority problem as involving the concept of usurping his power. The ego believes that this is what you did, because it believes it is you. It follows then that if you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. The ego is quite literally a fearful thought. And however ridiculous the idea of attacking God may be to the sane mind, never forget that the ego is not sane. It represents a delusional system, and it speaks for it. Listening to the ego's voice means that you believe it is possible to attack God. You believe that a part of Him has been torn away by you. The classic picture of fear, of retaliation from without then follows. Because the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected. Although Freud was wrong about the basic conflict itself, he was very accurate in describing its effects. Whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is, however, only the acceptance which makes it real. It is perfectly possible not to accept what is in your mind. If you enthrone the ego in it, the fact that you have accepted it or allowed it to enter makes it your reality. This is because the mind, as God created it, is capable of creating reality. We have said before that you must learn to think with God. To think with Him is to think like Him. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Perverted thinking will always be attended with guilt because it is the belief in sin. The ego does not perceive sin as a lack of love. It perceives it as a positive act of assault. This is an interpretation which is necessary to its survival because as soon as you regard it as a lack, you will automatically attempt to remedy the situation. And you will also succeed. The ego regards this as doom, but you must learn to regard it as freedom. The guiltless mind cannot suffer. Being sane, it heals the body because it has been healed. The sane mind cannot conceive of illness because it cannot conceive of attacking anything or anyone. We said before that illness is a form of magic. It might be better to say it is a form of magical solution. The ego believes that by punishing itself, it will mitigate the punishment of God. Yet, even in this, it is arrogant. It attributes to God a punishing intent and then takes over the intent as its own prerogative. It tries to usurp all the functions of God as it perceives them because it recognizes that only total allegiance can be trusted. So, me just see where I stopped. We had a lot of noise outside. The ego cannot oppose the laws of God any more than you can, but it can interpret them according to what it wants, just as you can. That is why the question, what do you want, must be answered. You are answering it every minute and every second, and every moment of decision is a judgment which is anything but ineffectual. Its effects will follow automatically until the decision is changed. This is a redundant statement because you have not learned it. But again, any decision can be unmade as well as made. But remember that the alternatives are unalterable. The Holy Spirit, like the ego, is a decision. Together they constitute all the alternatives which the mind can accept and obey. The ego and the Holy Spirit are the only choices which are open to you. God created one, and so you cannot eradicate it. You made the other, so you can. Only what God creates is irreversible and unchangeable. What you have made can always be changed, because when you do not think like God, you have not really thought at all. Delusional ideas are not thought, but you can think that you believe in them. If you are wrong, the function of thought comes from God and is in God as part of His thought. You cannot think apart from Him. Irrational thought is a thought disorder. God Himself orders you. God Himself orders your thought because your thought was created by Him. Guilt feelings are always a sign that you do not know what I just said. They also show that you believe you can think apart from God and that you want to. Every thought disorder is attended by guilt, and its inception and maintained by guilt in its continuance. Guilt is inescapable for those who believe that they order their own thought and must therefore obey its orders. This makes them feel responsible for their mind errors, without recognizing that by accepting this responsibility, they are really reacting irresponsibly. If the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement, and I assure you that it is, then the responsibility for what is atoned for cannot be yours. This contradiction cannot be resolved except by accepting the solution of the undoing. You would be responsible for the effects of all your wrong thinking if it could not be undone. The purpose of the atonement is to save the past in purified form only. The purpose, I'll say that again, of the atonement is to save the past in purified form only, so it's been transformed. If you accept the remedy for a thought disorder and a remedy whose efficacy is beyond doubt, how can its symptoms remain? You have reason to question the validity of symptom cure, but no one believes that the symptoms can remain if the underlying cause is removed. The continuing will to remain separated is the only possible reason for continuing guilt feelings. We have said this before, but we did not emphasize the destructive results of this decision at that time. Any decision of the mind will affect both behavior and experience. And what you expect. This is not delusional. Your mind does make your future and can turn it back to full creation at any minute. If it accepts the atonement first, it will also turn back to full creation the instant it has done so. Having given up its thought disorder, the proper ordering of thought becomes quite apparent. God, in his knowledge, is not waiting, but his kingdom is bereft while you wait. All the sons of God are waiting for your return, just as you are waiting for theirs. Delay not. Delay does not matter in eternity, but it is tragic in time. You have elected to be in time rather than in eternity, and have therefore changed your belief in your status. But election is both free and alterable. You do not belong in time. Your place is only in eternity, where God himself placed you forever. Guilt feelings are the preservers of time. They induce fears of future retaliation or abandonment, and thus ensure that the future will remain like the present. This is the ego's continuity and gives it a false sense of security through the belief that you cannot escape from it. But you can and must. God offers you the continuity of eternity in exchange. When you will to make this exchange, you will simultaneously exchange guilt for peace, viciousness for love, and pain for joy. My role is only to enchain your will and make it free. Your ego cannot accept this freedom and will oppose your free decision at every possible moment and in every possible way. And as it makes you know what it can do because you gave it the ability to do so, the mind does indeed know its own power, because the mind does indeed know God. Remember, the kingdom always, and remember that you are part of it and cannot be lost. Remember the kingdom always, and remember that you, who are part of it, cannot be lost. That mind that was in time, that mind that was in me is in you. For God creates with perfect fairness. Let the Holy Spirit speak. Let the Holy Spirit remind you always of her fairness, and let me teach you how to share it with your brothers. How else can the chance to claim it for yourself be given to you? Yeah, so that's talking about guilt as the decision that's opposite the decision for God. And it says we all have a choice in every moment. And if we choose to identify with the ego thought system, which is the false self, we create guilt and we feel it. And then we fear punishment because we've chosen away from love. Now, most people are completely unaware that that's what's happening day in and day out. And the ego hides that choice from us. And the choice for guilt, the choice for the ego thought system, is always the choice to be separate from God. To be separate means to be a separate self, so that you no longer identify as your true self, which is your God self. And your actions will then create the behavior of insanity, lack, joylessness, attack, projection. But it says at any moment, your mind is so powerful, it can come back and say, I made a mistake. I'm suffering right now. I need to choose something else here. I wasn't aware at that moment that I chose suffering. So you get a chance to choose again. And your mind is so powerful that the moment you choose again the love of God, it's done. And to choose love is to choose the mind of God, to think as God, which never thinks in separation. And it's impossible that it would have any thoughts of attack or judgment or projection. So I hope this reading is perhaps making this guilt a little bit clear for us all. And the way the Course in Miracles is written, it's so, it's so completely pulled apart. And as you read it, it will create sanity in your mind. Even if you don't understand it, if you read this slowly, out loud even, to yourself, or listen carefully, your mind is being converted back to health and wholeness, and to the mind of God, which heals everything. Okay, this is the first try, so let's see how it goes with everybody. Bye now. Bye-bye.